Hey everybody, and welcome back. So in this video we're going to talk about something that I feel really strongly about, and that is the pre-flight checklist that we should be doing on our model aircraft. And I'm going to dive into this. I'm going to try to keep this video kind of short, but it's really important that you think about how many crashes you've seen that might have been prevented by a good pre-flight of the airplane. So let's get started into this. So what we're going to do is talk about pre-flight checklist. If you don't know what a pre-flight is, it's where you walk around the four corners of the airplane and you basically inspect it. So when you think about a model aircraft, most people think about the rudder, elevator, ailerons, throttle. If it's got retract landing gears, you know, the gears going up and down. But each of these have systems, okay? You may have flaps, like I'm showing here. You might have the retracts, like I just mentioned. When you think of the four corners of an airplane, and the top and bottom, there's hinges. There's all kinds of things involved in making this work. You got servos, okay? And I've seen a couple of potentially very dangerous crashes because a pre-flight was not done on the airplane, okay? But first I want to talk about is a full-scale pre-flight checklist. So you have what's called normal operations, and then you have basically if something's going wrong, emergency procedures. And it's just really important to think, at least I do, that my model aircraft is just like a full-scale aircraft. Okay, and in a minute I'm going to talk about some of the really good luck I've had by doing pre-flights. But as you look at this, all of this is what you really you should have knowledge of, or you should actually execute when you're flying a full-scale airplane. Okay, now sure, a full-scale airplane, it's your butt up in the air, and if something goes wrong you could die, or you could possibly kill a lot of people on the ground. So I know there's going to be people saying, yeah, but model aircraft, you know, well, most model aircraft nowadays are not cheap. They're very expensive. It's an investment. So if you're okay with crashing that, that's one way to look at it. But what if you actually hit somebody or hit a car, or, you know, did something that affected somebody else? That's not a good day. But before I dive into this, I want to talk about a sponsor I have, and this is really, really exciting, everybody. RTL Fasteners, I've used their screws in the past, the ones on the bottom there for my servos, holding my cowling on and everything. If you go to their website, rtlfasteners.com, and you purchase $50 or more and use the code DA30, you will get 30% off. So you get 30% off on orders more than $50 if you use that code. So let's dive into this now. So when you look at these three airplanes here, these are my three favorite airplanes I fly almost all the time. The one on the left has an 188-inch wingspan. It's really cool. The one on the top right is an Avante that I actually glass and painted because I wanted to do some experiments on weight with the glass and paint. I love flying that airplane. I just love the way it flies on rails. And the bottom right hand is a Rockstar biplane that I got at a raffle. And I love that airplane. So these are my three go-to airplanes that I fly. But sometimes I design and build things like this. Now this was my C-130, had a 181-inch wingspan. Right before I test flew it, a gentleman fell in love with it and offered me more money than I thought anybody would ever offer for it. So yes, I did sell it. But this aircraft was going to be one of my most complex aircrafts I had ever designed. And when I actually built it and tested all the stuff in it. But this had 25 servos in it. So if you feel comfortable building something like this and not doing a pre-flight checklist on it, that's not good, because things go wrong, things wear out, things get bumped. If you've got a really hard landing, you need to be checking the airplane out. So what does having good pre-flight checklists do for you? Well, my MSL-1 has 1,356 flights on it. I did almost lose it once, and believe it or not, if I would have had on my pre-flight checklist an item about the batteries, that would not have ever happened. And I'll talk about that in a minute. The MSL-2 now has 124 flights on it. I treat both of these big airplanes just like a full-scale airplane. I do a pre-flight of some level every time I turn the radio on. Okay? So let's talk just a minute about the way you see things in your airplane. Like this was when I upgraded my all my aircraft with Futaba with S-Bus. I went in and kind of reconfigured everything so I could visually see my receivers. Now on an electric, I don't have to have them wrapped in foam because there's no vibration. So just a rubber band holding my receiver down is all I need with an electric airplane. But if it's gas, you're going to have it wrapped in foam. The reason I like to be able to see my receiver and see everything is because wires get pulled out sometimes. If you pull on the wire on your servo wire, that's wrong. You got to grab the plastic because you can end up working that wire out of the pins, or at least get the insulation worked off it. And then over time they could touch each other and that could shut down your entire radio system. So it's really important that you can visually inspect things in your airplane. Now, every spring I do what I call my annual, which means I go through everything on all my airplanes. But before I fly them, I just do visual inspections. So here's a really neat document that actually you can get online. If you type in Academy of Model Aeronautics over 55 pounds, you will find a link to this. Now search it in Google. You have to click a couple of buttons, but you can find this. This is the checklist that if you're going to fly a plane over 55 pounds that you need to have. And because most of my planes right now weigh over 55 pounds, at least my big ones, I use this religiously. Now you can extract certain parts out of this to make it apply to any airplane. But this document is really cool for just getting some information on how to put together your own pre-flight checklist. Okay? And go through all 4 of those pages. But then I actually have what I call my abbreviated checklist for my aircraft. If it's gas, on the left hand, this is my pre-flight for a gas-powered plane. Some of you might have some other things you check, but at a minimum, this is what I check. Okay? I didn't add in little things making sure my canopy was tight and all of that. Those are things that you should be doing also, but this is what I call my standard pre-flight checklist for a gas-powered or a glow-powered airplane. Okay? So when you think about something like my Avante here, which is an EDF, which is electric, you many times just open up the top, you shove your battery in, you plug your wires together, you listen to the ESC beep, 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 and you're ready to fly. I have seen more people pull up to the field, open up a truck, pull out an airplane, put a battery in it, and just take off down the runway without even doing a control check sometime. So it is vital that you look at your receiver, your wires, make sure everything looks right in there. See if anything just looks chafed. You know, just spend a little bit of time. And if it's got retracts, pick it up in the air and cycle them once or twice and see how they're working. Okay? It's just really important that you look at each time you're putting your plane into the air, are you sure nothing got banged up in the truck coming to the field? Okay? Or your van or car or whatever you've stuck it in. Here's my pre-flight checklist if it's an electric. It's pretty much the same as a gas, except you want to check and make sure that your motor cutoff works. If you fly electric and you don't have a motor cutoff set up on your your transmitter, in my opinion, you're doing it wrong. Because the nice thing about the motor cutoff is you flip that switch, if you happen to hit your throttle, you're not going to cut your hand off on a propeller. I don't know how many people I've seen get hit by a prop on an electric because they accidentally hit their throttle and they didn't have a motor cutoff switch. That is so important. And then you need to just really make sure you check your throttle, make sure all that works. And then you got your battery. You got to check your battery condition, the internal resistance, which I'll talk about in a minute, and the capacity of the battery. Is the battery still holding a charge? And then the rest of the stuff is basically the same as a glow or a gas. So now what I want to do is dive into briefly here, your battery. Over 12 years, I have owned probably 100 or more lipos. I used to know that number, but if you watch my other videos where I test them to destruction, you know I end up with a lot of lipos that just aren't good enough to fly anymore. But the first thing you should do is visually look at your lipo. Look at all 4 corners, look at all the sides, make sure there's not a big gash in it or a dent. Now, and I'm not putting anybody down when I say this, but some of my FPV pals that fly drones, they pile drive those things. I mean, they send it right into the earth like they're trying to get to China, and the battery's got a dent or it's got a big twist in it, and they just keep flying it until it catches on fire. I wouldn't do that. The reason I wouldn't do that is you just don't want the thing quit flying in the air on you and maybe hit somebody or fall into a car, you know, or just do something dangerous. If your battery's all banged up, you definitely don't want to be flying it. Now I'm going to talk about internal resistance real briefly, and this is part of my pre-flight. Every time I fly a battery, when I'm done charging it, when I'm done recharging it, I'll check the internal resistance. Sometimes I'll check it with it completely down to 3.7 volts, which is the minimum I like to get my batteries to. But if you look at that battery pack on the left, that was a really healthy battery that had a great internal resistance. If you look at the battery on the right, you can tell the internal resistance is bad. What internal resistance is how easy is it to pull the current out of the battery. The harder it is to pull the current out, the more heat the battery produces, and it can puff like that. So the thing is if you got an internal resistance basically below 5 on each cell, you've got an absolute perfect battery. If it's 10 and below, it's still a great battery. If it's 15 and below, it's good. When you get up to 20, you might start watching it. If you get to 30, it might be great in a glider or something, but if you're wanting to pull a lot of amps, it may get hot. It may not give you the amps you need. And then when you get into the 50s on internal resistance, the battery's pretty much garbage. But if you still got one, you're going to put it in a glider, who cares? Another thing to think about is, are all your cells pretty much balanced? That is really, really important. So now I want to share with you what happened to my MSL1 where I just about crashed it. And it would have been totally my fault. I had been flying batteries for about 5 years in it. My lipos get about 350 to 400 flights because I take care of them. I discharge them. I put them in a storage charge during the winter, and I keep them balanced and healthy, okay? Well, these batteries, I hadn't been checking the internal resistance on. And what happens is you can go to full power, and the engine comes up pulling the 6,000 watts I needed, and got into the air. And as soon as I was in the air, I felt my power starting to drop. So I immediately turned away from the field, get away from people, because we had a big field in front of us. And I knew I was going to have to land. And then the motor quit. So my actual low voltage cutoff kicked in, which I normally have that set really low, and I had forgot to set it on my ESC. So I immediately cycled the throttle and got enough power back. I leveled the wings, and just out of a complete miracle, I landed her out in the field, didn't even hurt the airplane. But I brought it back in, did internal resistance checks, and they were in the 40s and 50s. The batteries were garbage. If I would have checked the internal resistance on those batteries before I flew that airplane, I would have never ever had it do that to me. So I put in 4 new batteries. Internal resistance were all less than 10, and it flew just fantastic. So all I'm saying is keep in mind that in your checklist, if you're flying electric, you need to be checking your internal resistance once in a while, okay? You just don't want to get into that corner you can't get out of with your airplane and crash it. And like me, I will always turn away from where the people is or the audience is. If the plane starts to go that way, I'll just put it in. Now I want to talk a little bit about some crazy systems, like if you got brakes, because I design brakes on most of my planes, and this is the brake I designed for the MSL2, and it's basically, if you know what a Volkswagen Bug 1968 drum brake is, not a disc, but a drum, that's basically what I designed here. You've got a servo in the bottom left-hand corner there that basically, when it turns, there's a cam, and it moves the 2 parts of the brake shoes apart, okay? But a couple of things you need to know about this. You got to inspect it, make sure it's working. But those are high torque servos. Those are 275 ounce servos. So every time I'm using the brakes, like to lock up a wheel and be able to pivot on that wheel, I'm pulling an enormous amount of load on my system. So my flight packs in my airplane, I check the voltage on every flight, because I don't want to get 2 or 3 flights into it and have some servos. And all my servos are like 460, I think, ounce servos on that airplane. And the brakes are like 275, and I think they're 275. So I've got a lot of really high amp servos on my system. I've got 2 massive lipos that run it, that go through voltage regulators, that basically bring the power down to 6 volts. So I don't think I'd ever run them down, but I still, out of paranoia, check the voltage each time I fly that airplane, okay? And then I want to show you this. right here. And actually, let me back up one. I'm sorry. This one here is just, you want to make sure things are Loctited and checked. This is, I just threw this in because you've got the main nut that holds the wheel on and everything. You need to check and make sure that you've got a little bit of blue Loctite on it. And then we've got this. And the reason I want to put this is I used 4130 chromoly really thin wall tubing for my landing gear, and I TIG welded it together. I believe it or not, I still check those TIG welds because I'm just paranoid because I use such a thin wall chromoly that the welds would fail one day. And out of 126 flights, whatever that is, they are just absolutely mint condition. So that's it, everybody. I just wanted to do a quick little video on how important a pre-flight checklist is. I have seen 2 large airplanes in the last probably 10 years go in where a pre-flight checklist would have caught the problem that the airplane had. So it's just vital. Now, look, even if you're flying a little park flyer, just check and make sure, are the ailerons turning the right direction? Is the rudder working right? Is the elevator working right? Are your horns still tight? You know, is everything still looking good on the airplane? I see people literally just plug it in and send it. And, you know, I'm lucky, and I know I'm going to jinx myself really bad right now. I've gone 12 years without crashing an airplane. Now, I have pile drived a couple of helicopters into the ground, small ones. I still have my, I can't remember what it's called, my bigger helicopter. I just don't have a radio for it right now, or I've got a radio and I haven't put it in it. But I have pile drived a couple of helicopters in the ground, but fixed wing airplanes, 12 years now without a crash. And the closest one was the MSL, where the battery internal resistance was fried. So I hope you enjoy my videos. Please like and subscribe. And I'm trying to build my YouTube channel up so more people see this, because I always get people saying, wow, I just found your channel. I wish I would have known it's around. I've got over 200 plus videos on it. So rock on, everybody. Have an awesome day, and I hope you enjoy these videos. Be safe. Take care.